Leary?
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Christy. How was your weekend?
Hello, was that you speaking, Shantina?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you a quick question. How you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good.
Hey,
I'm
what's up,
good.
Christy? What's the question?
I feel like I feel like I missed like one part of when we were doing the post fetch and all that other stuff. And when I don't know if you guys remember, I had the wrong terminal open the last time. And since then, I think I'm still utilizing the wrong thing because my stuff isn't working. So I just wanted to know, like, what are you guys using when doing your post fetch and all of that stuff?
All right. So to test to see that I can get a connection to the API,
Mhm.
I use Post. Postman. Once I know I can get a connection to the API and I want to bring it into my project, it's JavaScript and Fetch. So Fetch goes with JavaScript.
Right.
So once you know, okay, I can reach that point and I can get the information from Postman, and you go ahead and you put that request, you put the thing in the fetch and do all the other stuff.
Okay.
And if you're doing a curl is terminal.
So the curl is okay. So even without the API, like going back to our the beginning of the week, like day 2 and day 3, just like those general to get back the list of the apples and oranges and how many words are in the sentence and the frequency of the word. I feel like sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not. And I think I'm not using the right platform for
And
it.
it's still the same thing because even though we didn't necessarily go read the documentation, he created an API
Okay.
to interact with his server.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were going out, getting the information from his server, or basically using his API. And so it's still the same difference, just different APIs and maybe different services. So if you're going to use the terminal, you want to use curl to make the request.
Yes.
If you are just trying to see, hey, can I reach this and make sure I can get back a response before I try to code it, then Postman.
Okay.
And then once you know, oh, I can go to that point and get it, and I want to bring this into my JavaScript project, that's when you're going to use fetch.
Okay.
So fetch is script, curls in the terminal, and
curls the terminal.
Postman is just basically just a test to see, hey, can I reach the best-selling list on the New York Times, right? Because if I can't reach it, then I can't program it. So Postman is just a quick way to test that connection and see if you can get what you can get.
Okay. I think I must have stepped out of the room at one of those points because I think that caused me to get behind throughout the week, where sometimes stuff was just working and sometimes it wasn't. And I think I was just using the wrong things.
And then, sometimes it could be the stuff that you're entering in, right? It could be a quote missing because somebody had a quote missing and that
yeah.
Maybe there's so when we were doing something with the access keys, right? There was an extra line, like somebody must have hit return. So we copied the line, and if you didn't notice
that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it could be stuff like that. But the where you use what were those 3 scenarios.
Okay.
Hey Ryan, how you doing?
How you doing, Ryan?
Doing moderate, folks. How you doing?
Good, thank you. I was just telling Larry that I think, I don't know if you remember at the beginning when I was using the console initially, and then I started using the terminal once you corrected me. And then I was saying, I feel like I still missed something because I feel like I was entering my information in the wrong space even after that. And it was just throwing me off. So he was giving me a piece of education and
Yeah,
helping me out.
yeah. I mean, it's software engineering is very detail oriented, and I
Mhm.
think you folks probably have already figured that out. But like, you get really good over time at like being able to look at something and just sort of see like little quotes or like new lines or just little stray
Mhm.
characters all over the place, and that just comes with practice.
Yes, absolutely.
But I promise it does get easier.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I need to turn on transcript. Max is like way better at running these Zooms things than I am. I'm like in a state of constant confusion. But speaking of a state of constant confusion, how's the New York Times project going?
OMG. So, well, I thought this is what I've figured out thus far is that so we pulled the API, we got it to come up, and then there's like 5,000 lines. So in my mind, I'm like, I don't need all 5,000 of these lines. So I need to determine what I need to display. So I am at least there. I need to
Nice.
determine, you know, what information I want, and then how to get it up there, I guess. Get it.
Yeah.
My
Well, let me give you a jumping off point in saying that I wasn't very specific in what you needed to display, and that was kind of on purpose. Like I wanted to sort of leave that up to whatever you think's most valuable to show in that. But that being said, I would guess you probably want to show a list of books somehow.
right out of the 5,000
Yeah,
lines.
but here, like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, if you took that raw text and you rendered that in the page, that would be good enough. That like accomplished the assignment. It's just you probably want to go above and beyond that, I'm guessing.
Oh, right. Well, I don't know that I would want to display all of that because it just seems like it would be too much. So maybe like I was thinking top um top like maybe hardcover and maybe audiobooks.
Okay. How about this? Can you share your screen?
I don't have anything up.
Okay.
Oh, wait. You mean from okay, so what day was that? We did that. Let me figure out the day and then I can share my screen.
I guess what I'm looking for is if someone has the request pulled up and has the response in something like Postman, we can sort of walk through the response and sort of I can try to explain what each bit means. I think that'd be helpful, but let me know if it wouldn't be.
Right. I don't know if I got my weather one or if I have
Oh yeah, we did weather too.
'cause-
Weather was cool because it helped to oh, I got this much.
If not, I can probably get it up here. I just wasn't
I
quite prepared.
got this one up. Let me see. Screen share. This screen. So I have this.
well, I could have ran it because I do have it. I have it in my thing. Yeah.
I have
Okay.
this, and then I can go live. Then bring this over. Wait a minute. Uh-oh, where did it go? Oh my God, where did it go? Wait a minute, I lost something. Oh, here it is. Whew. Let's see. So
Now you're gonna have to do something like a response.text to get the body of that response into a printable form.
So should I just be in Postman maybe?
Yeah, it might be easier to start in Postman with this.
All right, let's see. So Postman
You have like the beginnings of the code there to do it for what it's worth. Yeah, here we go. This is exactly what I was looking for.
okay.
Can you make that full screen and then make that bottom panel maybe a little bit bigger with the response body in it?
Like this?
Yes. Scroll up. I think this is what I'm looking for. Yeah, go all the way to the top. Okay. So this is a pretty daunting response. There's a lot of keys, a lot of values. I believe if you can you hover over line 6 with your cursor? Over where the line numbers are. Yeah, you see you can collapse bits. Click on that little arrow.
Oh,
Okay. So what that does, just to make it clear here, is that will take a section of the JSON and collapse it. So you can just sort of like, it sort of is hiding it for you. And why that's helpful is we can look now at the top level object and sort of see what's going on here. And then we can uncollapse it and then we can dive into the results there. So at the uppermost level, we have a bunch of keys and values that largely seem kind of irrelevant, like status okay. Yeah, we kind of know that from the status code. Copyright, I guess they maybe legally have to put that in there. Num results, that's kind of interesting. So that seems like maybe remember we were talking about pagination, sort of the number of items you're getting back. It seems like maybe that's the number of items in the page. And last modified, I don't know what that means, but it's some sort of timestamp.
so this one, actually, you know what? I changed this. I did something different. So see, it says hardcore graphic books, hardcover graphic books. I figured out how to do it so that I would only get a section. So this is a little bit different than the
Okay.
but this isn't what I want, but I got this. I just wanted I don't think I want graphic. I just want hardcover.
Yeah, how about this? Let me pull up the exact request. For what it's worth, like if you want to use that request, you're welcome to.
Right. I just
a-
realized, but so this was what I guess what I was asking about. So you can do this like I guess individual. So let me just ask you this before we go. So this is what I would pull this into, well, when I got this narrowed down to what I wanted, I would pull this into, I would use my fetch and then bring this over into my JS in my project.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. I'm in this. Where's the button? Stop sharing my screen. Okay.
I'm curious, before we get actually a little bit further into this, how much Max helped you with this particular assignment and how much is just him hacking on it?
That was me. But that part was me. Max did help us because I think he felt sorry for us. But that part was me. Looking at something and figuring out that I didn't need 5,000 lines. So that was me by myself. I did that by myself. But
the thing
I was with some assistance, but not necessarily a whole lot. But yeah.
The thing I'm really curious about, because this always ends up being the thing that takes students the longest, is figuring out how that API key fits into the request. Is that something Max helped you with, or did you folks figure that out on your own?
So I will say this before I read on Max. I will say that the bearer authorization, we do have that down. But the whole API / key =, and then that was assisted.
Okay.
I figured it out on my own. When I first tried to run it, I got like I wasn't authorized, so I got a 401. And then when I went back to the thing, I looked all the way at the bottom of the screen, and it said that the query needed the API key, and then the parameter was yeah. So I got that on my own.
Nice. Yeah. So the part of the reason why like the assignment is using the New York Times API is because it's not the best API. And like that's the thing I've done on purpose because I want to sort of expose you to often how these things actually go in the real world and not like a perfect example. So the two ways that usually folks end up figuring that out, I'm just saying this because this is probably going to be recorded and people are going to watch this and might be helpful, is they sort of very critically read the document, just like Larry did, and notice that at the very bottom. Or the other way they do it is there's this API tester thing built into the page where you can sort of try out the API. So if you enter in the, like try it out, it'll have you enter in your key and you click like go. And if you look at the Chrome dev tools and like all the network requests that are coming, remember we talked about that, you can take a look at one of those requests and see how the API tester thing formatted it. And you'll see $API key in there. So those are usually the ways people end up figuring it out. But anyway, let's get back over here. Let me see if I can get this up on my screen. Yep. Okay. Nice. Okay. So here we go. And yeah, this is like 4,910 lines. Lots of lines. So let me collapse this results thing. So status, okay, it's a kind of, it's not all that helpful. Copyright, not that helpful. Num results, so 90. That's, I would guess that's probably the number of items in something. We'll sort of work through that. And then results. Results is where everything looks like it's going to be. So it seems like that's really where we want to go. Inside of results, we've got lists. And we've got a bunch of keys here. Bestsellers date, a date, published date, previous published date. So the way these New York Times bestsellers lists work, as I understand it, is like they're periodically published. So there's like a list that's published on a date, and then some time will go by, and then another list is published on a date. So I would guess this is the date in which that list was published. Or wait. 6/19.
That didn't happen yet.
Yeah, that didn't happen yet. Okay, maybe 6/4 is the date.
Or 6/12, previously published date.
And you know they probably determine stuff before it's going to be actually published. Maybe.
Oh, that could be.
That's the only logic I can get from that.
Is 6/19 like yeah, it's a Sunday. And that's probably a thing where like every Sunday they publish their lists. So this is maybe a bit of a weird case because we're running this on a Sunday. So like a list was published today and there's going to be another list maybe published next Sunday or something like that.
Pull that calendar up again. It looks like they do it. Oh, okay. Previously published. Because I was going to say next Monday. It's not a Monday. Because one of those dates is Saturday.
6/19 is next Sunday. 6/4 is Saturday. Yeah.
Odd.
Well, but like, I guess I don't know what any of this means, but that's probably fine. Like, if we really need to figure it out, we can look it up in the documentation. I don't think this is all that important for showing this data. I think lists here, this is really where we want to be. So lists is a big array of objects. So that's a good sign. Array of objects probably map pretty well to like array of best-selling books. Okay, there's a lot of these. I'm going to not collapse them all, but yeah. And that's the last key. So, okay. So then in one of these here, all these objects look to be identical. I'm going to collapse books in here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a bunch of lists. That's right. So they publish like a bunch of different lists in different categories. So like category, there's combined print and ebook fiction, updated weekly. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So every list, it looks like, has an ID. So sort of a unique number that'll be the same for every single list. So every single version of that list. So let's say I made this request now, and then I made this request in a week, and there's sort of the list, the books on the list have changed. I could compare these IDs between those different weeks, and I could sort of say, oh, this list and this list from the next week, they're sort of the same list. They're sort of the same kind of books are in that list. So that's what that might be useful for. But in our case, again, not all that important. List name, we might want to render that as like a header or something.
Mhm.
Or maybe actually display name. Yeah, okay, those are kind of the same thing, ampersand and whatever. Those sort of images, yeah, okay, so really there's not very much in here too. I mean, you can see how much like fluff is being returned here. Like we haven't really used any of this stuff yet. That's not unusual for APIs, for HTTP REST APIs, for what it's worth. Okay, books. Now I think we're gonna get into like the meat here. Yeah, this is looking a lot better. So books is an array. Now, keep in mind, like we have a bunch of lists. Each list has a bunch of keys, and each list has a bunch of books. So there's sort of, as we're diving down here, there's sort of a number of concepts we're traversing down. And it means that if you want to render this here, if you want to render everything in this, you have to render every list. And when you render a list, you have to render a bunch of books in that list. Now you could decide, I just want to render the first list. And if that's the case, then you just ignore, you only use this first object in the array and you just ignore everything else. Again, up to you there. But let's say you want to go that path to just make this easy. So you only work on this first list here. And then you have a bunch of books in this list. So each book has an author. It has a description. It's got to have a title in here somewhere. Yeah, a title. It's got a book URL on some sort of New York Times thing. But there's what's helpful here, by links. We've got links to it on Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, other places I've never heard of, but maybe are important.
Google.
Yeah, so this, and the other thing here, we've got this book image. If I click on this, oh, well, okay, it's not going to work. If I go to this in a web browser, we'll see we get a little title.
Oh, wow.
So this is I'm making an HTTP request to this URL, and it's giving me back a JPEG. So I can include this in an image tag if I want and just render this. So, okay. So we've sort of walked through all the different levels here, and at the book level, other than the by links, yeah, that's sort of the lowest it goes. So there's response. Response contains a bunch of lists. Each list contains a bunch of metadata, but importantly also a list of books. And then each book then contains author, image, title, all the sort of important pieces of metadata. Okay. High level, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take this and let's start actually traversing through this a little bit. So I'm going to take this here. I'm in raw form, a little bit more compressed. So if you do it with pretty in Postman, it'll like nicely format it for you. If it's raw, it'll just give it to you in this massive block of text. For what we're about to do, the massive block of text is going to be a little bit easier. Okay, let's get this open here. Okay. I'm going to take all this and get rid of that. I don't want to do that. I do not want to take a survey. Okay, so I'm going to take a shortcut here. Instead of making a request to get the data, I'm just going to say body is equal to json.parse and then paste this big string. So what that's going to mean is if I then console.log body, I'm going to get this sort of big JSON string parsed into a JSON object we can play around with. So or we should. Maybe we won't be able to here. That. So like a maximum line length. Great. Okay. Well, we're gonna have a little more fun then. Let's take the pretty version. Sorry, technical difficulties here. Wait, there. What the heck? Why is this not working for me? Okay. Okay, there we go. So I have this in JavaScript, just so we can sort of play around with it, take a look, do whatever we're going to do. If you wanted to get this in JavaScript, probably the easiest way is to make the request with fetch, get the body, parse it, do all the stuff we did in class 2 weeks ago, and you can get the same sort of representation here. I just want to not go through all that right now, just so we have it here so we can play around with it and it's super easy. So once we have our body, we want to go into results. So I'm going to log out body.results. That was sort of where all the important data was. Okay, lists, body.results.lists. Okay, so hopefully what I did there just made sense. I just traversed down through the object, through each key to get the value, and then down through another key to get the value. So I've now have an array of all the lists of books.
Okay.
Now let's say I'll set that equal to a variable called lists. Let me log that out to just to prove that it's working. So there we go, we got our lists. Okay, let's say we only want to work on the first list, just to make this easy. So I'll go const list is equal to lists 0. So the first list, there we go. So this is an array, getting the first element of the array. That should hopefully look really familiar. Okay, so here's our first list. Let's say we want to do something with the list name. I guess display name is what you're supposed to use. So let's do something like list title list.display name. So also I want to call out that I'm not just doing something where I'm going like body.results.list.0.display, like something like that. I'm trying to break this down into variables line by line. And by doing it this way, it means my code reads a lot better. So if you see something like this, you don't really know what's going on here. Like, I mean, I guess you kind of do, but it's like harder to read. You're thinking like, what's lists? What's the bracket 0 about? It's just a lot of sort of text. So I put this into lists to sort of shorten it. And then I then did list 0 is list. And notice the plural and singular. So now, like if we say list.displayName, that reads a lot better. Like you're thinking, okay, there's a property called display_name on list, and I'm doing something with it. So I would say in general, if you find yourself doing like these massive sorts of nested traversals where you're like going down like 10 or 15 levels, it probably means it's worth breaking it up into a few lines, into a few different variables. The other reason this is really nice is I happen to know that I want to access the books here too. So I can just go list.books, and I don't have to repeat all that a second time. So let's log that out, see how that goes. Okay, list title, that's good. And then we've got our list of books here. Okay, before I keep going, how does this feel to folks? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
So the what was that? The 90, that's showing us that there's 90 different lists of books.
Right here?
Yeah.
I would guess so. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but it seems like there's a lot of lists, so that is feasible.
Console.log did. So you
Oh,
console.
I did. That's right.
That
Oops.
line right there, number 5. Oh, number 5.
Yeah, let's take a look. That's a really good point. Oh, there's only 18 lists. Yeah, I don't know what this number results means. Maybe the number of books in all the lists combined. It's kind of a weird number.
So there's an array of 18 of them, and they all have different numbers.
Yeah, 5, 5, 5. Do they all have 5? They all seem to have 5. 18 times 5 is not 90.
It is.
Oh, it is? Hey.
It is?
Yeah.
Wait.
Okay.
So
Well,
each
I
list
can't.
has
5 books.
Oh, okay. So in each array, so it's 18 arrays, and then there's 5 books in each array.
Right, because each list has the top 5 bestsellers. Because at first I was confused. I'm like,
Oh, that makes
that's the top
sense.
5 bestsellers when it started. But then I looked, I'm like, well, there's different categories with top 5. So then I went back and looked at your example. I said, oh, he has all the different categories with the top 5. All right, I'm in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so
guess I can't do math.
okay, that makes a lot of sense. So top 5. So then we would, so to the top 5 would be a good thing to want to display, right? That would be something that would make sense to.
Each list is the top 5 books in its category. So the top 5 in fiction, the top 5 in horror or whatever. Each list
Hardcover.
in that, hardcover. Each list is the top 5 of that specific category.
All right.
Mm-hmm. I
So
bet.
Wait.
Yep.
Okay. So, paperback. Oh, advice how to. All right. I'm just trying to see I mean, I want to display it, but I want when I go by myself, I want to make sure that I recognize this stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. I'm good.
So I bet there's a way you can paginate this endpoint and get it to give you like the next 5 for each list or something. I haven't played around with that, but this number results makes me think that might be a thing that could be done, but whatever.
So then it could be like the top. So you thinking like if there was a top 10, the other 5, you're saying?
Yeah, like there might be a query parameter you can pass here called like page and then give it like page 2. And that'll give you books 5 to 10 or 5 to 9 in or 6 to 10 or something like that in each list.
Within each array. Okay.
So what you could do in theory, if you wanted to show like a long list for each one, is you could paginate, but you've got like a bunch of lists in each page. So you sort of have to like aggregate each list independently for each page. This is like way above and beyond. Don't anyone feel like you have to do this. It's more just we're on the topic, so I wanted to bring it up. Yeah, so we've got all of our lists here. And okay, so got our books here. We've got a list of an array of objects. So this is something where I want to do something for each of these books. So I'm going to loop over this. I'm going to go like var const book of list.books. And then something like console.log book. So all I'm doing here is I'm looping over this array. I'm going to log out each object individually on its own line, like that. So let's save that, reload that. Okay, here we go. Cool. Let's now, let's see what sort of metadata is going to be important about these books. Title, that's a good one to start with. So maybe we wanted to go like console.log book info. Something like that. Book info, book.title. Okay. There we go. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Why are these all in caps? It's kind of weird. Our book title, like, our book title is normally mixed case. Never really thought about that.
You know, yesterday I was working on something with movies, and I noticed some of the movies were all caps. Yeah, so maybe so.
That's just how it works. Okay. Okay, so we've got a book.title. Let's see, what other book info do we want to log out? I'm going to get rid of this for a second. Let's just log out book again here. So book title, maybe description. Oh, author is important. Okay, so book title, book author, book image. That's a good one. Oh wait, it's book image, like that. Oh, and then the by links might be interesting too. We'll get to that in a second though. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So image, author, title. So now we're starting to work through this data. And you can see sort of here, like this is sort of the kind of code to do something a little bit more than the bare minimum you're going to need in your project. What does everybody think? Any thoughts?
So this was helpful for me.
Cool.
I mean, I'm working, talking my way through it, but I'm listening at the same time, so it's making sense.
Yeah. Cool. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I said that's what I was thinking I should have been doing. Holding along.
Yeah. Well, I'll post this in, let's see, some channel here.
Live.
This one. Cool. Yeah. So at this point, once you have data sort of here that's like the raw data you want, you're sort of at the point where if you want to make HTML DOM elements with it, this is sort of where you would do that. And since we're already kind of down this path, maybe I'll keep going here and we can sort of render some of this stuff to the screen. How does that sound?
Good.
Okay. So has Max taught you about document.createElement?
Document.createElement. No, we use get element by ID.
Yes. The
same premise, maybe.
Well, yeah. So what getElement by ID will let you do is it'll let you select an element on the page and it'll let you change the contents of that element. The problem is that works really well if you have some static text or some static content you want to put into an element. You can also set inner HTML on that element, which I think is what you folks have been doing if you want to like put HTML inside of that element, right?
Mhm.
Does that inner HTML property sound familiar? Okay, seeing Larry nodding his head. So that's another option. So you'd end up doing something like document.getElement by ID, my ID dot inner HTML is equal to something kind of like this. And you could do like P my fancy bold text. So you could sort of put your own tags in here. So
Mhm.
this is an option. The thing is, what you need to do if you want to use this is you're going to have to go through this list of books and basically dynamically build a string of HTML. That's doable. So actually, why don't we do that? That would be like something you folks probably would be familiar with. And then I'm not completely teaching something new here, which is probably good. Okay. So cool. So I added up here a div, has my ID as an ID. And at the very bottom, below all my fancy parsing code, I just added document.getElement by ID inner HTML. And I'm just setting it equal to some HTML. And reload the page, you can see we got it there. And if I inspect it, we have a p tag. It's got a strong tag in there. So we've got some sort of rich text going on. Okay, cool. The thing is, we need to make this string dynamically. So to make that dynamically, I'm going to start by making a variable up here. I'm going to call it HTML string. And I'm going to set it equal to an empty string. And then every single time we loop around, I'm going to add something to that string. So to start with here, I'm just going to go HTML string is equal to HTML string plus maybe something like book.title. Something kind of like that. And then instead here of rendering the static string, I'm just going to render HTML string. So that's new. This is new. And this is new right here. So what I'm doing, this is going to end up with is I'm going to start with an empty string. I'm going to loop over each of the books. So book 1, this is going to run. So I'm going to log out a bunch of information about the book. And then I'm going to add to the end of HTML string a space and then the book title. Then I'm going to loop around again. I'm going to run this for the next book, log out all the book information, and then add to the end of it a space and the next book title, and so on and so forth. So when I save this and I reload it, you're going to see we get all of our book titles here. Sparring Partners, It Ends With Us, Where the Crawdads Sing. Right there, right there, right there. And then there and there. So cool. Okay, so we got some data on the page. That's awesome. Let's do a little bit more though, because like it'd be nice to have these sort of like separated in their own little containers. So let's put a div around this. Also, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar, but this like dollar curly brace syntax for interpolation, this seems familiar, right? This is not completely out of left field.
Yes.
Okay.
Temperate literal.
Yes, you know the fancy word. Very nice. Okay, so I'm going to put each one on a div. Cool. So now we got something that looks kind of like that. Okay. Let's say I want to render that image, because that would be kind of cool. But have like the image and then the title next to it. So I'll go like image src equals and then book.book image. something kind of like that. So let's see what this looks like. Got a bunch of images. Very nice. Cool. Let's do a little bit of styling on this to make this look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to give this a class of book image. I'm going to give this a class of book. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to do something like, and I realize I don't have any of this in like a HTML tag or a head tag or a body tag. Pardon my laziness. You probably want to actually do that, but yeah. So I'm going to make a style tag. I'm going to do like book. I'm going to make each book like 64 pixels high, and then book image. Let's do like padding right 8 pixels, and also put padding 8 pixels on this, something like that. And that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Oh, because I have to probably do height 64 pixels on the book image. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't look terrible. That's always the bar. It doesn't look terrible. So I'm gonna, the CSS is just to make us look a little bit better, but it's not really like, I'm hoping you folks can figure that part out. So I just added some styling on this. We've got our book image, and yeah. Okay. Sweet. I'm gonna get rid of that space just because that in the markup's bugging me. Let's add something like an author. Maybe you could do like, we could make like this in an H2 or something. And then the author in like a span, I guess. Book.author. Of course that messed something up. Let's see. Oh yeah, because it's not in line. Okay. This is going to be a strong instead because I don't want to worry about all that. There we go. Okay. Very nice. Maybe I could even do something fancy like by right there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we're starting to get somewhere, but there's one more thing we don't have, and that's our list title. Let's get that up at the top. So let's say I made a H1 and I gave it an idea of title. Something like that. Maybe do something like here go title and set that equal to something like that. There we go. Very nice. So this is sort of the goal, something like kind of like this. What do you folks think?
So this is introductory, right? The introduction to the HTML portion.
What do you mean introduction?
Like you're showing us, like leading us into the HTML part of it.
Yeah. So this is one approach you could use to put together to render some information into the HTML of the page. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, like, shouldn't we be able to click on something? Like if you maybe click on the different things and it takes you somewhere. Like, does it link you to something, or?
We could do that. I mean,
I'm just wondering, or is it at our discretion how far we want to go with it?
It's at your discretion how far you'd like to go with it.
Okay.
The reason why I say that is because some folks are really going to have a challenge, and for them, just like even like making the request in the browser is like going to be a challenge. And for that, at that point, it's like, I just want you to put something on the page. And then some folks are going to like be like, okay, I got that, and they're going to want to go all out. So like the goal with that sort of statement is to try to help tailor the assignment to what the student's able to get out of the module.
Okay.
So this is more of an advanced application, but I think it looks a lot nicer.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is API part 2.
I guess so. Yeah.
Now, when you first started, I just want to go back for a second. When you first started and you were trying to pull into, I think that was VS Code. What was going wrong that it wasn't working in the very beginning before you started?
Yeah. So all the fun I was having with like trying to get that JSON body. Yeah. So okay, this is gonna border on a rant. VS Code is an editor with a lot of intelligence in it, and that can be really nice. But one of the downsides to an editor with a lot of intelligence in it is it takes a lot of memory and processing power to make that intelligence work. So for example, if you try to paste a single line in VS Code that is something like, how big was this body? Like 200 kilobytes. Wow, that's way smaller than I thought it was. If you try to paste a single line in VS Code, it's as a rough guess, about a byte is a character. So about 200 kilobytes, that's about 200,000 characters, I would say. Yeah, even with the 1024 thing. Yeah. So I tried to put 200,000 characters on one line. VS Code did not like that. So I saved, and it just sort of like cut off part of the line or did something weird. So I tried a couple permutations, and it turned out that like I just had to like get sort of that right. As you might have guessed from sort of my fumbling around with VS Code isn't a tool I use on a day-to-day with my development. And that's part of why, because there are certain things I value in code editors. And one of them is that I can open up large files. I can have lines that have hundreds of thousands of characters of text on them. And like the editor doesn't have a hiccup at all. I don't know, just different set of values, I suppose. But it that was what was going on. So I just had to sort of finagle with it a little bit. And eventually I sort of came up with a permutation that made VS Code happy.
I'm just wondering, so if in case someone is trying to do it on their own and they're getting it's bouncing back on them now.
Yeah, I was just using the static version of the body just so that I could iterate a little bit faster. But if you're doing this on your own, I would say it's a prerequisite. Get the request working with fetch in the browser first. So log out that data that you get back from the response in the response body, put that through JSON.parse, and then log out the data you get from JSON.parse. And that data that comes out of JSON.parse should be exactly the same as body in this little thing I typed. So like, imagine something here like response.text.then text or something like that. And you did something like JSON.parse text to get something like body. And then imagine I indented this all over like this. Yeah, there we go. Something kind of like that. So like you would get your response back, you would parse it as text, get the body, and then use the body for everything else. Or maybe something like this would work too. But yeah, either of those. So don't do what I did here. I just was trying to, for me to write that fetch and to like make sure it would work in like quickly, I just thought this would be quicker for the class. So this is really what you want to do.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else I can assist with this stuff? I realize you've heard some of this again from Max, and hopefully he's explained it in a bit of a different way that might be easier for some folks to understand than the way I explain things. But if there's anything I can sort of bring up or try to clarify, let me know.
I think I'm pretty good. Thank you.
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing that was different was we were using a weight.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I'm sorry, Kristen. I was gonna say too, that when you were showing creating element, like, can you show that? Because I was like watching some YouTube videos and I didn't cross that.
So
It
I'm
seems
gonna-
easy.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Real quick though, I'll get this set up on a wait. So I made a point to Max when I started this sort of section, and I told him, I don't want you to teach the students async await, like right off the bat. And my reason was, I think it's really important that people understand how promises work behind the scenes. And when you sort of learn async await and don't understand it, it seems like it's way easier. But what you end up doing is you end up using async await without understanding what it does. And then you get into more complicated promise situations in the future, and you're just really, really lost because you don't have an intrinsic understanding of what putting a weight in front of an expression really means. So that's why I've avoided it. And I've sort of put in my wish for Max to avoid it, but I know he didn't. And he has his own perspectives on things which are different than mine, but that's why I haven't used it in any of what I've taught. But you totally can use it. And if I were writing this code in a situation where I had to like maintain it going forward, and it was something where like I was writing it professionally, it would be all async await. Anyway, let's okay. So document.createElement, per Larry's question. What this will do is it'll set the contents of an existing element. In the process of that, you can put markup in here, and it's sort of smart enough to parse that markup and realize, oh, there's a div here. Okay, I need to make a new div element. And oh, there's an image inside. Okay, I need to make a new image element inside of that div I just made. All that sort of stuff. And it's just, the browser can do that for you if you set inner HTML. What Createelement does is it sort of lets you control that at a much lower level. So I can do document.createElement, and document.createElement takes a single parameter, which is a string, and is the name of a tag you'd like to create. So let's say I want to create a new div. So I'm going to put this new variable here. Const div equals, okay. So what this will do is it will create a new div in memory in JavaScript. So this is a little bit of a complicated topic, but each of these tags behind the scenes in JavaScript has sort of a JavaScript object that represents it. So this div on it has an object that backs it up, that when you do something like get element by ID, what you're doing here is you're actually getting a reference to the backing JavaScript object for each of these tags. So like I make this div here, and when sort of the web browser renders the page, it will create all these backing objects for every element in the page automatically for you. So once that happens, you can set properties on them like inner HTML, and that'll sort of affect how the the elements sort of display themselves or sort of change things about them. It's sort of the API that the browser exposes, to use a term from our classes, to affect the contents of the page. So there's a different way you can do it. And this different way is, instead of modifying existing elements, you can create your own elements from scratch. So what this will do is it will create that backing object for the HTML tag. So what div will contain, and I'm going to save this, I'm going to reload it here. I'm going to, in the JavaScript console down here, I'm going to type div. It will contain what looks to be here like an element, but this is actually a like backing representation of this tag. Why this is an important thing to bring up is this is not in the page. If you were to look through this, you wouldn't find any divs in this page that don't have a class or an ID associated with them. So you might think, okay, well, why is it helpful to make an element that's like not in the page? Well, the reason why is in order to add it to the page, you have to be explicit about how you want to add it to the page. So there is the most common thing you might want to do is, let me just add an element to the end of the body. So there is a value in the browser called document.body. And this is equal to the DOM element that represents the body. So document.body, you see I'm hovering over this, it's highlighting the whole page. It's the same thing again if I hover over this right here. So this thing here and this thing here are the same. So if I do document.body, document.body contains a bunch of value. I mean, it's got a sort of, that backing object has a bunch of properties I can access. And one of them is a method called Append Child. If I run Append Child, what this will do is it's a method, so it takes parameters, so it's a function, and I'm going to give it that div that we just created. And what this will do is this will take an element you give it, and it will put it as the last child element within it. So if I save this and I reload, I want to take a look at what happens right here. So now our div is right here. So I reloaded and it showed up. So why this is cool is, let's say I want to do something like make a div. I could do something like div.inner. I'm going to do inner text, just sort of very similar to inner HTML, and just do something like my text contents. Reload it. You can see now it's there. You might think, okay, cool, whatever. We've been able to do that before. But here's another thing where this is kind of nice. Imagine you wanted to put elements inside of this div. So you could do it with the whole inner HTML thing, but the thing where this gets a little bit hairy in particular, imagine book image or like title or something contained a tag or a closing tag. Imagine title was something like this text string. Something like this. Think about how this renders. So inside of here, I'm inserting the string, and it's going to make strong, and then insert the string, which is going to be closing strong tag, and then a bunch of stuff. And then so what you can do is you can sort of insert tags in here, and you can get into a situation where you're allowing the user to sort of directly insert HTML into the page via user-generated input. And this has a name. It's called cross-site scripting. And the reason why they call it that is, imagine I did something instead like this. Actually, and this will be good enough. Something like this, where our book title is this. What's going to happen is I'm going to render this. I'm going to load the page, and all of a sudden I'm going to see an alert that says, oops. So I think you folks know what alert does, but if you don't, if you run this will pop up. So this is bad because anyone who has control of the API we're getting this data from can effectively control, can cause JavaScript to run on our page that we don't even know like what that JavaScript is. And it could do things like, let's say, for example, look at all the tokens or look at all the cookies you have and sort of like send those off to a third-party server and sort of steal them all. So this is a very common sort of attack vector. So common, it has a name, cross-site scripting. And it's one of like the most important sort of vulnerabilities in web applications to know about and to sort of guard against. So the downside, I mean, I'm being a little long-winded here, but it's because I want to sort of give all the sort of history and background. But that's why this is not ideal, because it's vulnerable to cross-site scripting. In our case, for the New York Times API, it's probably fine, but it's not really good practice. So this is where something like this becomes a lot more viable, because something like inner text. So inner text is not inner HTML, it's a different element, a different property. Inner text literally sets just the text contents. So I can put in something like this, and assuming I have things right, I might not quite have this right, but we'll see. And I reload this, you'll see, well, it should work. Didn't though. Invalid or unexpected token. I thought it was inner text. Yeah, well. Oh, the backslash or the slash. No, wait. Is that it? I don't get why that should be. Okay, yeah, I guess that was a problem. Interesting. Well, whatever. But you can see here, like this just inserted literally that text, and that like this is the ideal. This is what you sort of want to prevent cross-site scripting. You just want to insert directly what came from the API. You don't want the browser to try to parse it and be smart and be like, oh, I see a script tag in there. Let me run what's in there. No, you don't. You just want the raw sort of text content. So this is where this can be kind of often a better approach. So it's more tedious. And you might wonder, okay, well, how do I like insert things inside of this div? Let's say maybe I want to make an image tag. I want to put it inside that div. So what you could do is maybe do something like const image is equal to document dot create element image, and then image dot. Turns out image tags have a property called src that you set equal to the same sort of thing you would set like an image tag's src attribute to. So just an image. And then what I can do is something like div dot append child image. Okay, so let me reload this now. So now what you'll see is we've got our div, we've got our text, and then we've got the image in there afterwards. So Append Child exists on almost every DOM node. It's a thing that's just sort of on these backing objects for the HTML DOM. And what it allows you to do is add elements inside. There's a couple other ones, like there's a prepend, and there's like one where you can like insert it at a specific location. Append Child is the most, I would say, the most common and most used though. So this way is the more secure way. It's the way that if you see low-level DOM mutative code in anywhere in sort of more of a production environment, it's going to be written in this way. It's a little bit less convenient, and you can see like reading through it, it doesn't read quite as well as something like this. But it has some really important security advantages. So yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but so basically what I guess what I'm gathering is that you just wrote everything, but it looks, because it says, well, so are we in, so you're using JavaScript and HTML simultaneously, I guess.
I'm using JavaScript to change the contents of the HTML page. So whenever I call any of these sort of API calls here, like create element or get element ID inner HTML, what I'm doing is I'm running an operation in JavaScript, I'm running a function in JavaScript or doing something in JavaScript that then causes the HTML page to change.
So this is, well, that's so usually when we set something up, we set up an index.html, we set up a script.js, and then we set up a style.css. But so when I'm looking at what you're doing, I'm seeing JavaScript, but
Oh, yeah,
is HTML. So that's why
I see.
kind of like cross, and we've pulled inner HTML and get element by ID before, so I get that concept. But the create, I'll watch this video again, but the create element was a little bit different. But I think I grasped what you're doing, because you're basically doing it's like interchangeable, I guess. Is that
Yeah.
the word?
They both do the same thing. This just has some security advantages because you're not parsing HTML in a string. I also want to call out, like, this is probably obvious, I would guess, having me taught and Max taught before and Max taught after, but like, as instructors, we don't communicate all that well. Like, I really wish I maybe I should do this next time. I should watch some of the classes, a few before like I have to teach, so I sort of know what people are doing. I'm sort of assuming that maybe you know some things that you don't, and that's definitely on me, and I'm sorry about that.
Well, we're learning, but I just want to make sure so that I don't walk away and because I'm like, I see the HTML at the top, but I see the JavaScript on the page. So I just wanted to make sure that we're in, so it's interchangeable, and that's a good thing, because we can do everything we need to do on one sheet. Or
He was being lazy, he said. So at the different sections. So up top in the header, you can do your style, right? You can do the HTML in the middle and the body, and then you can, well, the whole thing is HTML. Well, the HTML part anyways. And then at the end of the body, you can do a script. And then so you can do all this stuff on one page. It's not best practice. He was just doing it in a quick way to show us the concepts. So yeah, he does have all three things on the one page, but the stuff that he was writing, primarily showing us running, was JavaScript. And he was
And I also didn't really like, if I had known that the way sort of you had been taught was like, oh, you have a separate CSS file, a separate JavaScript file, and you hadn't really seen as much things like inline style tags, inline script tags, I would have done that just like because it would be easier for you folks to follow. I just didn't know. So I just sort of assumed
here, because we have done some, because there was one where we just set a few things up in the HTML and then we did everything else in the JavaScript. So it's not foreign, but I just wanted to make sure that I fully understood.
Yep, makes sense. You can take everything in the script tag and move it into a separate script file, everything in the style tag and move it into a separate CSS file, and it'll work exactly the same.
Just have to make sure that you link them.
Yep.
Link everything together.
Right. He didn't have to make it together this time because it was all basically in the same file.
Right. I guess another thing too is because we have separated everything, I didn't usually we create HTML in the JavaScript file. I've never seen it in the HTML file where we did everything. Like they're all interchangeable, but this was the first time I saw this done this way today. So
makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you can think of everything inside of the script tag effectively being in that separate JavaScript file.
Another question I had, Ryan, and I just realized that I did this. So for our projects like the weather API, we get an API key. And if we want to post the code to GitHub, I know it's not smart to post the API key as well. So I'm glad mine was private when I just did it. So I got to go fix that, I realized. But I probably can find it somewhere. How would we get around that? So having, how would we get around that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's a really astute observation. So the short answer is, from what you've learned so far in the class, there's really no way to avoid it. And if you send an API key to the user's front end, like the browser, then it's sort of open anyway. Like they can make a request to your page, look at the code, and the API keys in the code. So I would say for that reason, if you're going to host this thing publicly, it's probably not that big of a deal for that API key to be published on GitHub or somewhere like that. Definitely not best practice, but like out of all the sort of API keys I would worry about, that's like one I would worry about near the least. But let me answer your question for real. Like, how would you get around it? So soon you folks are going to be talking about writing your own servers. And one thing that a server makes really nice is all that logic is running on one system, and it's running in its own sort of private contained environment. So someone can't go in and sort of inspect the code of a server in the same way you can do that with a web application, because the server code's running on an external machine. It never has to be sent to your computer. So you just never have access to that code. So one thing you could do, you could write a endpoint, or a sort of a path that your front end code could make a request to. Your front end code can make a request to, let's say, like weather, like get/weather. And then when the server receives that request, it could then on its own make a request to this weather API with the API key, and then get the response back, and then send the response back to the client again. So you sort of end up with this thing, what they call a proxy sort of request, where a request comes from the front end, goes to the server, then the server makes a request to somewhere else, the request comes back to the server, and then your server then sends it back to the front end. And by doing it that way, you can send that request with the API key at the server level, and then the front end never has access to that API key. It sort of has an unauthenticated access to that data, and the API key lives at the server level.
Okay, so basically, my application that is in public for everybody to see, if I was able to set up the code in some way that I had my own server, the JavaScript will connect to my server, who has the API key. It's gonna go make the request to the weather thing, give them my API key, get the response, and then the response is going to be sent back to the application. So,
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
All right. I don't know how to do that at this point. I think I watched a tutorial a long time ago that did that. That's kind of what made me think about it, but I had to dig it up somewhere.
Yeah, and I would say maybe like a month-ish out, if I had to guess. I forget the order in which things are happening this cohort. But yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, like I think this has been told to you all, but like the end goal of sort of this whole program is for you to have written a web application, sort of a front-end browser-based web application, have written your own server, have deployed that server onto some like host somewhere, and to have an application where your code on the front end is talking to your code on the back end, and you have the sort of like a whole sort of package you've put together.
Okay.
So you're going to learn about it soon enough.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time and appreciate the questions, everybody.
Yeah.
That today was very enlightening. I think I feel much more comfortable and confident to go forward. Do you have availability this week? Could we hit you up on Slack if we have questions?
Yep. I'm still in Pacific time, but I'll do my best.
Pacific time. Where are you again?
Right now I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, actually.
Oh, okay, so yeah, that's not okay.
But normally I'm in Syracuse.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you.
Good night,
Definitely
everybody.
gave us a good video to refer back to. So,
Awesome.
all right. Thank you.
Sweet. Have a good evening, folks. Bye.
You too.